It's been cold here, but back on a Tuesday or Wednesday, I got a new frisbee and went to the dog park, and threw the frisbee for like 5 hours with some friends there, jumping fences and running. Even climbed a tree when the frisbee got caught up there. And yeah, the rest of the week I could barely move. So it's tough. It's tough getting old. But we're here. We're talking baseball. We got, I think, a pretty fun 10-game slate. I honestly kind of like all the slates, but this one does seem particularly interesting to me. I don't think any weather issues whatsoever. Pretty decent weather throughout the country. Should see some offense today. I think it's 50, 60 degrees most places. So nice day of Sunday morning baseball. We do still have 2.5 more hours before lock. So don't have all the lineups yet. They are kind of trickling in this morning. And of course, we'll continue to do so throughout the show. So should have most of the information we need to break it all down. Sundays are always a little bit wonky in MLB with some different lineups. Catchers get rest more often on these types of days. But regardless, we're here. We're breaking it down, and we'll get into it. Before we do, for those of you who are here early on this Sunday morning, hit that like button. Helps us out. We'll get to other stuff like that throughout the show. But let's jump right into it, stats. We will start out with the Houston Astros and the Washington Nationals. Maybe Bryce was partying with Christian Javier last night because he was also scratched recently. He's out. Mr. Hunter Brown, he of the worst DFS start of all time, maybe. Negative 23.7 fantasy points, 2 starts ago against Kansas City. Did bounce back and pitched decently well against the Braves of all teams in his last start. But he'll make the start here for the scratched Christian Javier. He will go opposite Mitchell Parker, kind of a ho-hum lefty for the Nationals, not really a prospect of any type, a guy that I would expect the Astros to certainly do some damage against. 56 degrees in Washington, D.C. should be pretty decent weather for hitting. 9 total. Astros still pretty big favorites, even with Hunter Brown on the hill. Throw it over to you, Stats. What do you see between the Nationals and the Astros here?
Yeah, I mean, I did my stacks, my team total stacks that I posted earlier. So for those in the Discord, you saw that. You get a slight bump here with excuse me, on the Washington stacks because their team total has risen just a little bit. But still not in love with the Washington bats in this game. I think Hunter Brown at the price. Yeah, I get it. That unimpressive to say the least outing against Kansas City a couple outings ago, and nothing great against Atlanta. But I think we've got a little bit better offense to target. So I haven't looked closely at what ownership's going to be, and I just kind of ran it. I kind of jumped on the podcast a little quick, so I ran everything a little earlier than I normally would. And I'm kind of coming up with something in like the 15% range on Hunter Brown on my first run, which kind of just kind of intuitively seems about right as I kind of look over the slate. So against Washington, you never mind targeting some pitching against Washington. I think at that price, and then obviously the offense for Houston is going to be really that's going to be one of your better stacks of the day, probably my highest stack of the day. And to get some of those big bats in with Houston, we're going to have to save some money. So I think while I'm not excited about it, I think Hunter Brown's a pretty decent option, maybe my 5th or 6th highest owned pitcher on the day.
Yeah, I'll probably end up leaving Hunter Brown to you. Just not
really are you just going to pass on it, huh?
Yeah, I'm not really a believer in his. Obviously, the results so far have been bad. I get the matchup is okay against Washington. This Nationals team is playing, I'm not going to say there's some great offense. They are playing at least with a little bit of spark this year, kind of middle of the pack in most offensive categories. I mean, they've got a 106 WRC plus. So they've actually been a bit above average offense so far against right-handed pitchers. And I would maybe be more in on Brown if there weren't some other cheap pitchers that I really like, certainly more than I like Hunter Brown. So I'll probably end up passing, only playing 4 lineups today on DraftKings. I don't think he's going to make one of the 4. I'm with you, though, on the Astros. That's for sure. I do think they'll come in as the most popular stack on DraftKings. I think they might.
Who I think the most popular stack will be?
Yeah, the Astros.
Yeah, I would think it'd probably be Houston today. Yeah, they've they were my biggest stack yesterday in the early, and that didn't go too well. Although the late slate went well, but yeah, I think people will come back to them today. They've been a little disappointing on the whole. A lot of times when I've had them as the number one stack, and Sundays, I don't know if it's just psychological or it's an actual thing. I know everyone talks about Sundays. I'm probably down about $2.7 million if I added it all up on Sunday baseball. I don't know, give or take $1 or $2, but it always seems like a wacky team comes in there and scores 1 million runs. But yeah, I still think Houston will probably be the number one stack on the slate.
Well, if you play it too much Hunter Brown, you might be down $2.8 million on Sunday. So don't go too far.
Come on, do you think like 15% is just going to be? I mean, obviously for you, if you're playing 4 lineups, yeah, I probably wouldn't play him. You think I'm going to be crazy over? I don't think I'll be really over the market.
It sounds about right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, 6,800. I'm sure he's going to project decently well against the Nationals.
I mean, he's got 5.5, right? So I'm just looking at it because I'm just kind of catching up. Like I said, he's got 5.5. Now it's juiced to the under, but his strikeout total is 5.5, which is not terrible on this slate. We've got some bigger name pitchers out there, but 5.5 at plus 125 right now on DraftKings is not terrible. So I mean, you could certainly see the value from 6,800.
Yeah, I'll be taking some of those Nationals bats. CJ Abrams has been amazing to start the year. Power speed guy. I mean, these we'll talk about Ellie De La Cruz, but these kind of mega athletes kind of taking over baseball a little bit right now. I especially with the rule changes with the stolen bases, more emphasis on athleticism. Guys like Ellie De La Cruz, CJ Abrams, obviously Ronald Acuna. I don't know, guys like Adolis Garcia, right? Guys who have holes in their games, oftentimes with like strikeout rates and stuff. These guys are taking over more than we saw, I don't know, 5-10 years ago when it was all dominated by power, on base percentage, right? Like you can do more with athleticism. So guys like CJ Abrams, I really like. Luis Garcia, youngster he's been around a while, but a young player. I like him quite a bit. He's cheap. Joey Gallo with the power. So I'll be playing some Nationals against Hunter Brown, especially if it does look like his ownership could get up there a little bit. Just not a believer in his, and I think this Nationals team could do some damage.
As you're talking about it, it kind of reminds me of the Friday show when we talked about Snell. I mean, totally different pitcher here, but when we were talking about fading Snell,
I almost won with those Zona stacks.
And we said, you know what, play a few Zona stacks to really get some leverage on the field, and where they put up 17 runs on Friday night. So. Yeah, I can get behind. I'll definitely have some Washington stacks in my 150 as well. But I mean, I'm not looking to go. I'm not in love with Brown, but I think the potential is there. Yeah,
no question. Totally get that. Let's go to the next game on the slate. This is going to be, by the way, a fast and furious slate. The games start at 1:35 Eastern time, and the last game of the slate is not even an hour later. Miami and Chicago, the last game at 2:20 Eastern time. So all of the games start within what? That's
45 minutes.
45 minutes. Yeah. Not a math wizard, but Stafford's got you over there. So there we go. It's going to be fast and furious on Sunday. I kind of like that for a Sunday, get these games over with in 3 hours, go watch some hoops. Obviously we've got the 4-game NBA slate as well. So fun day of sports for sure.
And we got Talladega today too, man. Talladega.
Yeah. I'll leave the NASCAR and Hunter Brown to stats. We'll be a baseball and basketball guy over here in the DC household. But the next game on the slate, Yankees and Rays. We've got Aaron Savale pitching for Tampa Bay. He's been really quite good so far on the young season. Solid in all 4 of his starts, making his 5th start today against the Yankees. I don't think I'm paying that $9,200 price tag against the Yankees today in Yankee Stadium. 55 degrees, winds blowing out to center field. Should be some a good hitting environment, or a decent one at least for this time of year in New York. Luis Gil will pitch for the Yankees, a guy I was pretty high on coming into the season. I remain, kind of in on him. He's faced the Blue Jays twice, Arizona once, 2 starts on the road. So it's been not an easy schedule for Gil, but the problem is the walks. I mean, 7 walks last time out. He had 4 against Toronto the start before that, and 3 in his first start against Arizona. I mean, that's just playing with fire. Now, he hasn't allowed very many hits, just 3, 2, and 1 hit allowed in those 3 starts. And he hasn't gone all that many innings, but the Yankees have been letting him throw a lot of pitches. Through 84 in his opening start, and then 95 and then up to 99 pitches in his last start. So they're viewing him stats as a full-on starter, which was a question mark with Luis Gil coming into the year. I know he hasn't gone far. I do think, if he can locate his fastball better, and command of your pitches is one of those things that can kind of come and go. We'll talk about another pitcher who had it in his last start. I'm not sure it's always going to be that way for him. But yeah, I do think Luis Gil, 7,900. This Tampa lineup, man, I mean, I think kind of sneaky bad, honestly. Like, even Yandy Diaz, Randy Arozarena aren't hitting at all at the top of the lineup. And I mean, the rest of these bats, like Richie Palacios, Isaac Paredes, Austin Shenton, Ahmed Rosario, Curtis Mead, Ben Rortvet, Jose Caballero. I mean, not exactly a household, lineup of big names here. The Rays bats have been pretty quiet so far on the year. It's mostly a right-handed lineup. I don't know. I could see Luis Gil maybe having a breakout start here. I am somewhat interested in him. I think the price is fair at 7,900. Looking at ownership, looks like he is going to get some, maybe around 20% ownership on Luis Gil. I think that makes some sense to me. I probably will have him on one of my 4 DraftKings lineups today. Wouldn't be more than that. And just kind of depending on how lineups shake out, might not be even either 1 or 0 for me on Luis Gil. But I do like him a little bit. If I was playing more lineups, I would certainly have exposure. 8K on FanDuel seems okay to me as well, although obviously not that likely to get through 6 innings, given that he hasn't done it yet. And then I don't mind this Yankees lineup. I know Savale has been good. Juan Soto in particular is just so locked in right now that I think he is a good play on pretty much every slate. He's the big Yankees bat that I'm really looking at today. What about you? What do you see between the Rays and the Yankees?
Yeah, I think we're on a similar page here. I mean, I think for GPPs, I think now it's not Gil, right? It's Gil. How do you pronounce it?
Heel. Yeah, like your Achilles heel. Yep.
All right. Well, I mean, I'm 20%. You said the projections are about 20, and when I ran it, I was about 20. I just think he's the type of pitcher in GPPs that you really like here. When you look at the strikeout projections based on the market, I mean, it's better than Savelli, and you're getting a supreme discount here. So he's got 5.5 minus. The juice is on the over, so minus 131 is the best line you can get on his over at Caesars. And then when
that's
you
a pretty nice strikeout line for him.
Yeah, 5.5 minus 131. I mean, so they're projecting it, closer to 6. Between 5.5 and 6 strikeouts for the game. Savelli's juiced on the under on that same number of 5.5. So, yeah, like you said, it's all about the walks with him, and if he can, you like that. This is what you want in a GPP. You want a guy who has potential for a lot of strikeouts, and if he could get the ball over the plate, not walk as many guys as he has. As you said, he's throwing a lot of pitches as well. So if he gets in a groove, he's the type of guy who can throw, 8 to 10 strikeouts for you in a game. Tampa, you mentioned, that offense, not the greatest. When you look at their strikeout rates, they are on the bottom half of the league as far as striking out. So I could see this being a pretty good game for Gil. And that's that price point in GPPs that I really think you need to focus on a lot of times, is between 7K and 9K for your pitchers. At least having one of those type of guys in for GPPs seem to be that's generally the sweet spot. You're going to see most of the time, more often than not. That's the range of where the pitchers that you're looking for. So I do like that. The Yankee bats, I don't love the bats at all. Not at all, but I don't love the bats tremendously on either side. Obviously, not huge on the Tampa side. I'll have a little bit more Yankees certainly than Tampa, but it's not going to be one of my higher stacks on the slate. When I look at just how I was running it earlier, yeah, I mean, I don't have too many Yankees bats, anything over like 5 or 6%. So I mean, it's not going to be, this game for me is going to be hopefully with Gil being the guy. Savelli, I'm going to have very, very little of, if any at all. And I'm not really expecting the bats to go off. I've got these as two of the weaker stacks on the board today.
Yeah, this isn't like a numbers-based take, but you do sometimes see teams sleepwalk a little bit through Sunday morning games, Sunday afternoon games, and Luis Field to me still does have like the type of stuff with the big fastball that I don't know if he's locating, throwing strikes. I could just see him, racking up strikeouts in a hurry in this one. Just I don't know, in my mind's eye, or whatever you want to call it. I do have some. Like, I do think he's risky, right, with the walks, but I do think the upside is there for Luis Field if he can finally throw pitches in the strike zone, which I do think he's capable of, given that his best pitch is the fastball. Sometimes pitchers just find it for a day, and I do think if Luis Field could find the release point, get in the zone, I do think has the potential to have a big day in this one. Let's go over to the next game on the slate, Boston and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Pirates minus 150 or so favorites in this one. We see Martin Perez on the hill for Pittsburgh. He's had a couple good outings, two bad ones, two good ones so far. Kind of Martin Perez-like. He'll go up against the Red Sox team, which continues to get decimated by injuries. They lost Tyler O'Neill to injury. Trevor Story done for the year. Rafael Devers. I don't think we have a lineup yet, but I would assume that he's likely to be out of the lineup tonight. And then Tristan Casas hurt his a rib or oblique yesterday. He's going to be out as well. So you do have a quickly declining Red Sox lineup here that doesn't look super good. I don't know if it's enough for me to go to Martin Perez at 7,500. I just don't think the strikeout upside is very high with him, but maybe. I mean, he does seem relatively safe pitching at home in Pittsburgh against a depleted Red Sox lineup. He'll go opposite Josh Winkowski, who looks like kind of a bullpen game. Yeah, so he did pitch back on the 16th, just went one inning in each of the last two outings. I don't think I would expect more than, 2 or 3 innings, 4 innings maybe out of Winkowski. Maybe have his K prop up that could kind of lend some knowledge on how deep he might go. But I'm not playing Winkowski, no chance. Perez, I guess, moderate interest in. I doubt he makes one of my 4 lineups. I think I'd rather play Luis Gil, despite the really good matchup for Perez. And then the Pirates look fairly interesting to me against Winkowski, who I think is a pitcher to target. Should get into that Red Sox bullpen pretty early, which isn't bad either. Your thoughts, your stats on Boston and Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I like the Pittsburgh side of this game, and I probably like Perez maybe just a little bit more than you do. I don't like him as much as Gil, as you said. When you look at his strikeout total, the prop markets, it's 4.5, pretty much even juice on both sides. So we're not expecting as many strikeouts, but you look at this team, that Boston lineup, as you said, this lineup's pretty depleted, and they do strike out a ton.
Yeah.
So you look a couple outings ago, his last outing against the Mets wasn't great for Perez, but hey, the Mets are the best team in baseball, obviously. So nobody's hitting them. Nobody's going to be scoring well against the Mets these days, right? So, and if you just look at the jerseys back there, that's the only reason I can talk a little shit. And when the Mets finally beat the Dodgers, but yeah, I mean, you look at, I think he won. He was in the big GPP winner two outings ago, Perez. So, I mean, the potential is there for him. And what you're going to get, you probably won't get as many strikeouts, or at least his potential for strikeouts isn't going to be as high as Gil, but he's going to have more control and potentially shut this lineup down, this Boston lineup down that looks pretty terrible. And I agree with you on the Pittsburgh side. This is going to be one of my favorite stacks of the day. So they're going to be up there, maybe like my third stack of the day. Where do they rank as far as, let me see, on so I've got them as the 5th ranked stack, and then I'm using them probably like 3rd or 4th most stacks, heaviest stack of the day. And I if you're playing a single entry, I think it's a nice way to go, throwing a full 5-man Pittsburgh stack in there today. I like that option. So for me, I'm just kind of staying away from that Boston lineup. Not going to take Winkowski, and I'll be in the mid-teens. I'm going to be right just under maybe where I'm going to go with Gil there at the price 7,500, and yeah, but the Pittsburgh stacks for sure I want to be in on.
Yeah, I'm in on Pittsburgh. Looking at ownerships, Saber just updated their ownership, like as you were talking, and they've got Perez down at 1% owned on the slate, which again, they always, the super low owned pitchers, as long as they're reasonable plays, always come in higher than 1%, right? I mean, but if he's really going to be like close to that low, 3, 4, 5%, I've got interest there. I mean, this Red Sox lineup is just so bad. Perez, he's not going to probably win you the slate by himself, right? He's not putting up 35 or something like that, but I think he's got a pretty good chance of getting the win here, getting through 6 innings. Like what, 20 fantasy points seems pretty doable for him at what we think will be a low ownership, reasonable price point. Maybe talking myself into Martin Perez. There's certain pitcher stats that like people love to play. Blake Snell, Dylan Cease, right? The big arms, the high strikeout arms. And then there's certain pitchers that they just absolutely hate to play. The guys who have been around forever, guys like Martin Perez. So I do think that ownership probably stays pretty low. Maybe people don't quite realize just how bad that Boston lineup is right now. I mean, almost all their good hitters are out of the lineup outside Jarren Duran at this point. So, yeah, we'll see what the lineup looks like for Boston, but might be selling myself on some Perez. The Red Sox, as you mentioned, have the highest strikeout rate against left-handed pitchers on the year. And that's, with other decent hitters in the lineup that are out today. So, yeah, I think Perez does make some sense. There are some cheap pitchers in the we'll talk about in the Detroit Minnesota game that I really do like, but Perez I do think makes sense as well, especially if you're playing a bunch of lineups. I would include him in the pool for sure. All right, let's get to I think the chalkiest pitcher on the slate. I feel reasonably certain saying that. It should be Aaron Nola in the Chicago White Sox Philadelphia Phillies game. Relatively low total in this one, sitting at 7.5. It's mostly because the White Sox have a team total of like 2.7 runs, something like that. I mean, this White Sox team is just absolutely brutal. We saw Zach Wheeler carry a no-hitter into the 8th inning yesterday. Absolutely mowed down the White Sox. And Aaron Nola, at least the field is predicting that he's going to do the same. Should come around, 40% ownership in this game. Now, Nola's expensive. He's 10.8K, and he hasn't looked particularly good this year. The surface numbers are okay with him, and he did look by far the best that he has all season last time out against Colorado. But that is the Rockies. Now, of course, he gets, the 2 GOAT matchups in a row, right? Rockies and White Sox, both at home for Nola. So I get it with Aaron Nola, but I mentioned this often on the show. It's going to be a theme throughout the year. Not always the case, but expensive chalk pitching I'm wary of because you need many things to go right. You need the pitcher, of course, to pitch well, but when they're expensive, you need them to pitch really well, and you need the optimal lineup construction to include an expensive pitcher, right? If a whole bunch of the expensive bats go off, even if Nola does put up 30 fantasy points, he still might not be the answer if you need Elly De La Cruz and Juan Soto and, Jose Altuve, you know what I mean? If those guys have absolutely big days, then Nola might not be the answer. So I don't want to say anything bad about Nola. It's not a bad play. If you've got a build that you like with him, he should be good here. No question about it. But I don't think he's a must play at all at that price point and ownership. In fact, I'm probably not playing on my 4 lineups. So I'll just come out and say it. I get why people are, but that's the way I'm going to approach this slate. He'll go opposite Nick Nastrini for the White Sox, who actually I hadn't really know much about him, but digging into him this morning, he does have some talent. He's got a pretty good fastball. You can see him getting some strikeouts here. I don't think, though, I'm using him against the Phillies. I do think he will be extremely low owned. And I do think he's got at least a little bit of upside. So if I was playing more lineups, I probably would have a sprinkling. 5% get over the field on him. But 4 lineups, doubt I will get to Nastrini. We'll throw it over to you, Stats. What are you doing with Nola and the rest of this White Sox-Phillies game?
Yeah, I think you were I think you're leading in the right direction with Nola. So this appears to be chalk that I don't mind fading. I think that price at 10-8, like you said, I mean, we're just looking for huge upside. Now, people are going to look at the fact that he's playing the White Sox. That team total projection, like you said, it's about 2.7. Do I expect the White Sox to do much in the game? No, but if I'm paying up as high as I have to pay for Nola, let's take a look at the prop market. Let's look at the strikeout market. He's not even projected to have the most strikeouts on the slate. Now, he should probably give up, at least projected wise, to give up the fewest runs, probably give up the fewest hits. But it's going to take I think it's going to take much better performance than the market is really projecting for him to be in the nuts. So if I just looked at Saber, they said about 40% owned, if I looked at it correctly. And I think if you're an MME player coming in well below that, I think is going to be smart here today. So I would go somewhere around 20% maybe on Nola. Now, this is not one of those situations where, sometimes we like to target. We were just talking about that in the previous game, where maybe you can play that, play Washington as a kind of a contrarian play. Or we talked about it with Arizona on Friday night. I don't think that's the situation here where you necessarily want to get some White Sox stacks in there to be that contrarian. I think you're contrarian enough by just not playing Nola in your lineup. So I'm not touching the White Sox bats, and I'm just going to be lower on. I'm hoping I'm going to be under the market here on Nola. I think Nastrini, if you're an MME player and you want to throw in 2 to 5%, I think that's fine. Leaving him out of your 20 maxes, 3 maxes, and single entries for sure. I wouldn't really get too crazy and throw him in there. But
what about the Phillies lineup?
Yeah, so the Philly bats. I'm not all that high on the bats in this game. What is the projections? They've got them pretty where we got them as the second highest team total projection, but as I ran it earlier, I'm probably going to be under the market. I didn't look where Saber got their stacks, because I'm probably going to be like maybe 3-4% on my main stacks.
I'll pull it up here. They've got Philly. Yeah, I don't know, like 8 to 12%, something like that.
Yeah, so I'm going to be under the market most likely here as I'm running it through my first go around on the Philly stacks. I just think I like coming down a little bit cheaper. And, I like that. I like the Pittsburgh stack. The Houston stack's been burning me, but I'm just going to go back to it. There's just a few other stacks in here. They're just going to be mixed in. I play a lot of different stacks in the 150 lineups, and they're going to just kind of be mixed in beyond my top 5. They'll be somewhere in there like 7th, 8th highest stack on the day. So I'm just really not high on the game and either side of this game. And I'm going to be hopefully under the market on Nola. I'm pretty sure 20% gets you under the market.
Yeah, definitely will get you under the market. And as bad as the White Sox lineup is, like you mentioned, I'm not really going into any White Sox. Gavin Sheets would be the one guy I would be most likely to use against Nola, trying to pick off a home run there. But like Lopez, Benintendi, those guys are not good hitters, but they do have like pesky low strikeout rates, right? Like where they can kind of run up Nola's pitch count a little bit, put a ball in play. Like you just need a big performance at 10.8K. And I don't think Nola, he's a bigger name, I think, than he is quality of pitcher at this point. I mean, it's not like he is, in my opinion, a top of the line ace. What do you have last year? 4.5 ERA over a full season. So I just don't see a slam dunk play on Nola like the market says he should be, given the ownership and the price point on Nola. So that's where I'm at. I understand if people are on him. Don't really want to talk people off of Nola. I do think he is, the safest play on the board today, but I don't think he's going to deliver a performance that you absolutely need in your lineup at the end of the day. Let's get to the next game on the slate then. The Angels and the Cincinnati Reds. 50 degrees at Great American Ballpark. Wind blowing out to center field. Should be a pretty nice hitting environment here. We have 2 pretty hard-throwing right-handers on the hill, especially in the case of Jose Soriano, rookie for the Angels. Throws absolute gas, 100-mile-per-hour average on the fastball. I believe the hardest throwing starting pitcher in all of Major League Baseball. He's not great. I think you could kind of maybe compare him to Luis Gil, where the stuff is there, the command, the art of pitching, maybe not so much. And then you've got Frankie Montas on the other side, who had some really good years over in Oakland, I think mostly. has been kind of banged up and has been pretty average so far. I do think both of these offenses are in play. Soriano, I wouldn't hate using as a GPP flyer at 6,500. I do think anytime you've got that kind of raw stuff, there is upside. But I lean more here, stats on the Reds side of the ball. They changed up their lineup a little bit. They moved Elly De La Cruz up in the lineup, I think maybe for the first time or one of the first times all season. He's been down in the 6 hole pretty much every game, but he will hit second here behind Will Benson. Spencer Steer hitting third against Soriano. I really like that top 3 in the Reds lineup in particular. And then, yeah, the Angels, they did. Anthony Rendon finally decided he's sick of baseball, so he faked a hamstring strain yesterday. He'll probably come back in September, something like that. He's out. And yeah, I think it's an okay matchup for Montas. I do think guys like Hicks leading off, Mike Trout, Taylor Ward, Great American Ballpark, all those guys make for pretty good plays too. So I'm more on the offenses here. I could see making a case as a GPP flyer for these pitchers, but I'm not going to get there myself. Where do you stand on the Angels and the Reds?
Well, I agree with you. I mean, the offenses are definitely the way to go in this game, and Cincinnati's going to be like my 1A, 1B with Houston. So I'm going to be pretty heavily stacked Cincinnati. But with that said, in 150, I'm kind of mixing in not a lot. I'm single digits on both pitchers, but I am going to mix in some of the some of both of these pitchers in my GPPs. I think, like you said, I think there's some upside there with Soriano at the price if he does shut down Cincinnati. I don't know how a lot of people play, but with MME, I'm going to be heavy on a stack and sometimes have a bit of the pitcher as well. Obviously, if you're playing lesser lineups, you're probably not going to be doing that. But for me, I will have a little bit, maybe like 5%, something like that. And then Montas, maybe just a little bit more. But yeah, I agree with you. Both offenses, like I said, the Cincinnati stack for me, and I like the 1 through 4 pretty heavily on the Cincinnati side. I'm just going to see. That's really where the bulk of my ownership is going to be, in the 15 to 20% range on the top of that lineup and in their stacks. I'm probably, I'm looking at 20% 5-man stacks, 20 to 25% on Cincinnati. So I'll be pretty heavy for me on that side of it. But with the Angels, they're not that far behind. I'm going to be like 10% stacks on 10% of my main stacks are going to be on the Angels as well. I kind of like their bats in this game. So I think that ballpark, wind blowing out, good things can happen. We can get a ton of runs in a game like that. So I think, if you're playing lesser lineups, you can definitely eliminate both pitchers and focus on the hitters, even game stacking, taking both sides of the offenses in this game and hoping that it's just one of those days where the ball's jumping out.
Yeah, and even if you're not fully in on the Reds, get some Elly De La Cruz in your lineup. That's going to be a common thing for me. I mean, this dude's got, what does he have? 6 home runs and 10 steals already on the year. I mean, just an absolute monster. One of those guys who's capable of, 20 to 30 fantasy point games on a regular basis. He put up 38 fantasy points 2 games ago. He's had a 40, a 25 already on the young season. A guy who can truly break slates, and he's one of the reasons why I do like to kind of go cheap pitching when I can. These hitters can break the slates just as often as a big starting pitcher. I know people don't think that way and don't like to build that way, but I love getting as many of these extremely high upside bats as I can into my lineups as often as I can. And Elly De La Cruz it kind of defines that. Go ahead.
DC, question for you. Like, if you're playing, I do mostly 5-2 stacks for DraftKings, and more often than not, that single player is going to be a high price guy. Do you look at it that way? Do you like to?
Yes.
Do you like to get in this, because they could do a lot of a guy like him especially could do a lot of solo damage without the entire lineup.
Yes, 100%. I never want to play my one-off as hitting in the middle of a popular stack as like a singles type of hitter. But Elly De La Cruz, I mean, the Reds could score 3 runs and he could put up 40 fantasy points, right? He'd steal 3 bases and hit a home run, and there you go. So yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I am willing to even build out less common build types, if there's a bunch of high upside bats that I want to get, like I don't have a problem playing like a one-off Mike Trout, a one-off Ellie De La Cruz, a one-off Jose Altuve, all in the same lineup, and hoping for 25 fantasy points from each of them, and they don't necessarily need their teammates. So I'm willing to build like that, certainly more than most people. Have had some success doing that, but you do want to make sure you've got the extreme high upside guys in your lineup. I think you have to justify a build like that personally. So yeah, I'm in on the Reds, less in on the Angels, but still there. And doubt I'm going to play Soriano. I do think he does have some upside for people playing a whole bunch of lineups today. That's the first 5 games on the slate. We do got 5 more to talk about, so we're at the halfway point here. Just a reminder, hit the like button if you haven't yet done so. Got a nice crew watching here on Sunday morning. And if you do want to join us over at Run Pure Sports, we've got, of course, NBA playoffs, MLB in full swing. We got stats on the NASCAR, UFC coming back next weekend. We got the golf winners, everything you need over at Run Pure Sports. You can use promo code DC15 for 15% off your first weekly or monthly payment. All right, let's get to the next game on the slate. Oakland A's, Cleveland Guardians. We've got Tanner Bybee pitching for the Guardians, who I think is going to come in fairly high owned on this slate. Yeah, I'm seeing him second highest owned pitcher behind Mr. Nola, of course. He will go opposite Ross Stripling, 2 right-handers on the hill here. Guardians, decent favorites, sitting around minus 165. Low total in this one, 7.5 runs expected. Pretty cool, and Cleveland should play more like a pitcher's park today for the most part. And then looks like pretty standard lineups for both teams. Bybee, I kind of throw him in the Nola bucket stats, where I get it with the matchup against the A's, and it's a good park to pitch in today for sure. But like Bybee has not been very impressive so far. I mean, he even had a negative outing against the White Sox. He faced the same Oakland team in Oakland, also a good place to pitch. Got only 4 fantasy points in his first start of the year. He did dominate the Twins, who have been one of the worst lineups, and then was okay against Boston. So it's been an unimpressive start for Bybee. I'm kind of, have not been impressed with him. I'm not really a Tanner Bybee guy anyway. I kind of think he's overpriced at 9,700 despite the good matchup, and I don't like that he's going to be chalk. So, if the 2 chalk expensive pitchers, Bybee, Nola, both smash, might be a rough day for me, but I'm not playing Tanner Bybee today, even in this matchup. Ross Stripling won't be going there either, but not a ton of interest in the bats. Mostly just a giant fade on this game for me. What about you, Stats?
Yeah, I think you could throw the bats out on both sides. Don't like it at all. Obviously the biggest question becomes Bybee and how much you're going to go on him. I kind of agree with you where I'm not as high either here at the top end pitching today. And now you're getting a bit of a discount from what you would on Nola. His props for strikeouts are better than Nola. So I'm going to be slightly over. If I'm down at like the 20% level on Nola, I'll probably be maybe the mid to high 20s on Bybee. But I agree with you 100%. If I was playing a single entry, I would probably just fade both of those guys and look to those guys in that 7K range maybe and go that route. So I don't mind that at all. You look at these previous starts, we're like, okay, he's facing Oakland, but I mean, 2 starts ago against the White Sox, he was awful, right?
He's done nothing all year, man. I mean,
it's been terrible, but we're like, and the Boston lineup that we just talked about. So it's not like he's faced these great offenses and he's got an excuse. So he's up against Oakland. I know a lot of people love that Oakland A's Sunday narrative, but we'll see if that holds true. But I'm going to stay away from the bats on both sides of this game. And again, I think Bybee chalk is dangerous. He's going to be chalky today. Everyone's going to be playing against these offenses, and I think I just think we've got better upside, and we could take some of the more expensive bats and leave Bybee out if you're playing a 3 max, 20 max type of game.
Yeah, I'll leave. You guys can have Tanner Bybee. I'm taking Ellie De La Cruz. There we go. That's my approach to this slate myself. Stats dissing the daytime A's. The daytime A's stats. I know you're relatively new to RPS, but we don't diss the daytime A's. That's been an RPS thing.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm new to the daytime A's narrative, but if it cost me today, it cost me.
Yeah, and you can follow Stats at Sensational on Twitter. He doesn't follow me, by the way, which was kind of
well. It takes a lot. Yeah, it you have to. At this point, I think you've earned it, and I'm gonna go ahead and follow you. But I like everyone to feel special when I follow them, and I just don't click on everyone right away. But we played golf together.
I got 40,600 of them following me. I don't need your. I don't need your. I don't need it.
All right, guys, whipping his dick out on the podcast. All right, okay.
All right, let's get to the next game on the slate. Baltimore, Kansas City. Pretty much pick them in this one between Seth Lugo, Cole Irvin. It's like the exact same weather somehow in every game. 55 degrees. Obviously, somewhat of a pitcher's park in Kansas City, especially home run wise. Lugo, a good pitcher for sure. I mean, he's been really good so far. At least at preventing runs. ERA around 1. Pretty crazy from Lugo. Of course, this Orioles team is capable of doing damage against anybody. They had a pretty good performance yesterday. Looks like they've got their normal lineup out there. I don't love going up against Lugo, just not that likely to get blown up, in my opinion. So I think I'll probably not have too many Orioles. Some interest in Kansas City against Cole Irvin, who's not very good. Witt, Michael Garcia, Salvador Perez, I think are all good plays. Vinny P has been on fire. Lefty, not ideal, but still, I think a reasonable play. I could see anybody, making the case for these teams. I think I'm a little bit lower than maybe the field will be. This is another game that I don't have a ton of interest either way. I don't think I'm definitely not playing either of these pitchers. More interest in the offense than the arms. But Stats, where do you stand? Royals and Orioles.
Yeah, I agree with you on the pitching here. I would kind of leave both of these pitchers alone. You've got, when you look at the prop markets on K's, they're both near the bottom today in projected strikeouts. I do have quite a bit of interest in the Kansas City lineup, though. So that's where I'm looking more so than the Baltimore bats. I like these Kansas City bats. Sally Perez was in our winner last night for 25K. Had a nice day. Had a nice night for us, and he's going to be one of my higher owned guys today. So yeah. I do like Perez quite a bit. Renfroe. So I like this lineup. This will probably. I think
Perez arguably the best catcher on the slate, I would say.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Yeah, he's going to be by far my highest owned catcher. I like Caratini as well, just as a cheap, getting a piece of that lineup, the Houston lineup. But yeah, for sure, the guy who I expect to score the most points on the slate will be Perez at the catcher position. So he's going to be one of my higher owned players overall because of that. So I want to get a lot of the 5-man stacks with Kansas City. Baltimore, not so much. Maybe, I'm going to sprinkle in a few, but I think the Kansas City bats are the way to go. Fade both of these pitchers. And and again, with these bats, Kansas City doesn't really strike out much. So, again, you just can't take the pitchers. I don't like either pitcher. Irvin, I think they get to Irvin today, and it's going to be. I think maybe Kansas City might be my favorite stack if you're not an MME. I think throw them in a single entry.
Yeah, you might have told me on Kansas City a little bit. Just a team I want to be high on while they're healthy and hitting well. And Cole Irvin, certainly a pitcher to target. So I totally get it with the Kansas City love. I will have them mixed in, especially Mr. Salvador Perez, who looks awesome to start the year and has had no trouble hitting home runs in Kansas City. 6 home runs already on the year for Salvador Perez. Get to the last 3 games on this slate. We get to Detroit, Minnesota, hinted earlier. I got some questions rolling in. We'll probably have time to do some questions at the end of the show. So keep them coming, guys. We'll get to some of those after we get through these 3 games. Detroit, Minnesota. We've got Louis Varland versus Casey Mize, two pitchers I was relatively high on coming into the season. Both have been just okay to start the year. Now, Varland in particular has had a brutal schedule. So the best team against left-handed hitters so far this season, no surprise, has been the it looks like Houston Astros are first, but we've got some right-handed pitchers rather. Varland throws from the right side. That's why my numbers were off. Atlanta Braves have been the best hitting team against right-handed pitchers on the year. The next three have been Milwaukee, Baltimore, Dodgers. Those are the three teams that Varland has faced so far. And obviously the results have not been great. But I think you kind of saw a little taste of what he can do. 6 strikeouts, no walks last time against Baltimore. Now he did give up 4 earned runs, 11 hit. I've watched all 3 of his starts. He's been, frankly, pretty unlucky. And I do believe in his talent. I think this could be a get-right game for, honestly, both these pitchers. I like targeting both these offenses, honestly, with opposing right-handed pitchers. You look at these lineups, there's a lot of strikeouts to be had. It is probably the best hitting weather in Minnesota that we've seen all season, 55, 60 degrees and winds blowing out. So that's a little bit of a concern. But both these pitchers can approach, and I would expect to approach 100 pitches thrown. I think both these guys are solid, number 3 type of arms. And I'm expecting good outings from both of these guys. Our guy Gary can't imagine him playing a chalk Louis Varland. I get that, but I do think Louis Varland is a good pitcher in a good matchup, and he's super cheap, right? I think there's a difference, in my opinion, stats between playing a chalk cheap pitcher and a chalk, expensive one. The same thing applies to NBA, right? You get like a 3K scrubber in NBA who's in the starting point guard. It's really hard for them to fail. Now, obviously, Varland, not a guarantee of success, but I think he's got a pretty good chance at 15-plus fantasy points here. I'd say the same thing for Mize. I like both these guys. If Sabres ownership holds true, which I really doubt it's going to be quite this discrepancy. They've got Varland at around 25% and Mize down at 3%. That doesn't really make any sense to me. I've got both these guys graded out pretty much the same today. So I guess that means I'm playing more Mize than Varland, because if I think they're about the same and the ownership's going to be drastically different, obviously I want the lower owned guy. But I am in on both of these pitchers. I think you can double punt pitcher on this slate, grab some of those big bats we've been talking about. It's going to be an approach that I take at least 1, maybe 2 of my 4 lineups today. And then I'm mostly out on the bats here. I do think with the weather in Minnesota actually being one of the better hitting conditions on the slate, I do think, guys like Trevor Larnach, who's been looking good, 2,600. I think he's got a good chance at a home run. I don't mind Kirilloff. And then, Kerry Carpenter has been on fire. So there are reasonable bats in these lineups too, but I do lean the pitching side. What about you, Stats? Where do you stand on Tigers and Twins?
Yeah, so if we look at the betting market on Varland, he's basically going to be projected out based on the markets for the same amount of strikeouts as Nola.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same price. It's 6.5 plus 120 to the over. So I think that's why I like what you were saying there. It's different when you're taking a chalky play at pitcher at 6,400, because he's not going to kill you with 15. Right. Nola gets you 15. It's just not going to get you there. If you get a Varland 15, potentially with the right bats in there, we could get.
If you told me Varland was going to get 15, I'd play a ton of Varland, right? I would gladly take that. Yep.
Yeah. But if Nola gets you 15, there's no way. Like, it's not happening. So yeah, of course. Am I projecting Nola to score more? For sure. But if they've got the same strikeout potential against a team that does strike out a ton in Detroit, I mean, I'm going to be over the market on Varland and under the market on Nola. Yeah. That's how I'm looking at this one. Now, you seem to be a little bit higher on Mize than I am. When I ran it, I was down in that low single digits as well. So I don't know if that's where the market's going to be. You might be right.
You must have a low K prop if you don't like it much.
What was that?
You must have a low K prop if you're out on Mize.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's down at 4.5 on his K prop, but he's heavily juiced to the over. So I mean, it's not crazy. So he's probably closer to like 5Ks on his number. And again, that probably has a lot to do with the fact that Minnesota is just a team that strikes out a ton. So we could easily, I don't have a problem there. I just think Varland to me is a clearer, better option on the slate at 6,400. Offensively, that means I'll have a little bit. I'm going to be going a little bit more Minnesota stacks as well. I'm just trying to see what my player, my project or my ownership is going to be on these guys. I'm looking at like 5 to 8%, maybe let's call it like 5% ownership on a lot of the bigger bats in the Minnesota lineup. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, Larnack is one of my favorite one-offs, even though I do like some Casey Mize. He's looked awesome at the plate. Big power. So
yeah, batting second. He's he's probably my highest owned Twins player. So
yeah, I do think he's an awesome play. He would be in my favorite one-offs if I wrote my article on Sunday, which I did not do. All right, that is Detroit and the Minnesota Twins. Let's go to Milwaukee, St. Louis yet. As far as I know, we do not have the Milwaukee lineup as of yet, but I don't think you really want to play those guys against Sonny Gray anyway. Gray missed most of spring training with the hamstring strain, I believe. It's looked really good since coming back. I think he finished second in the AL in Cy Young voting last year, something like that. 64 pitches back on April 9th, and his first outing got up to 72 over 6 scoreless innings. Still hasn't given up a run yet over 11 innings. I would expect him to be around 85-ish pitches in this one. Against, Brewers lineup that has been good so far is missing Christian Yelich. And they were good yesterday. So, yeah, I mean, they're a reasonable offense for sure. I do think Gray is pretty interesting at 9,500. Ownership-wise, yeah, maybe 15 to 20% on Gray. That makes sense to me. So I do like him a little bit. No interest really in Colin Rea. I do think Brendan Donovan, I assume he's leading off, makes for a good play. I do like lefty power in particular against Colin Rea. So, yeah, somewhat in on these Cardinals bats. Nootbaar, hitting third, I think is reasonable. No Brewers for me against Sonny Gray. That'll be a common theme, just not a guy I want to target. What about you, Stats? Milwaukee and St. Louis.
Yeah, fairly boring game for me offensively. I'm going to really not be looking at the bats at all for this game. And then on the pitching side, I'm right in that range where Sabres projecting. So I'm going to be in that 15 to 20% range. Like you said, he's looked pretty good coming back. You could get some strikeouts against this Milwaukee lineup. His projection is on the betting market. So he's 5.5 juice to the under plus 120. So he's going to be right around that 5.5 strikeout total, which is, I mean, it's not necessarily what we want from 9,500. We are getting some better props from Bybee and Nola when we get up into that higher price point, but that's why I'm going to be a little bit under. So I'll be under Gray as far as where I am on Bybee, but I think I'd rather be at the market. I feel more comfortable being 20% on Bybee than I do getting too far over the market or over the market at all. I'm sorry, on Gray around 20% and then being over the market at all on Bybee. So I think you can get a little bit like 20% Gray, 25% Bybee, something like that, and Nola in that same range, and be okay if you're an MME player. And again, I don't think you need to necessarily play Gray here at all if you're in a single entry. I would avoid it. I think as we're going through the card, I like these cheaper pitchers better and getting in some of these more expensive bats. So I think just kind of punting the expensive pitching today could be the way to go if you are limited on the amount of lineups that you're playing.
Makes sense to me. Similar approaches for sure on our builds today. Let's get to the last game on the slate. It's, I think, a pretty interesting one in Chicago at Wrigley Field. We've got the Cubs and the Marlins. Kyle Hendricks pitching for the Cubs. It's been a rough ride for Hendricks, who has scored negative points in 3 of his 4, and he did manage to score a solitary fantasy point against the Dodgers. Has had a tough schedule for sure, but man, this guy, what's he throwing, like 87 mile per hour fastballs up there? Not going to work too often, and it does seem like Hendricks could potentially be on his last leg. He does get, I guess, a pretty decent matchup against the Marlins. I'm certainly not playing Kyle Hendricks, even at the 6K price tag. I do like some of that left-handed power for the Marlins. Looks like we could have some winds blowing out to right field. Josh Bell, Jazz Chisholm, Jesus Sanchez would be kind of the main three I'd look at. I'm not going crazy with the Marlins, but I do think those guys make for reasonable plays on this slate. And then Edward Cabrera pitching for the Marlins. I've seen some love for him in the chat. I get it. A very talented dude. Missed, I think, a shoulder injury in spring training, missed most of it, but obviously felt healthy in his last start. 6 strong innings against San Francisco through 91 pitches, 10 strikeouts. If you look at some of the underlying metric stats, he threw 90% first pitch strikes. So he was just ahead of that Giants team all game long. And when that's the case, he's got the stuff to shut them down, right? I kind of think, going all the way back to like a guy like Luis Hill, Soriano, when they're really feeling it and can get ahead of hitters, they're capable of big outings. The problem with Cabrera, the inconsistency with him. He's got an extremely high walk rate, essentially every stop at the minor leagues, major leagues, even in his rehab starts this year prior to his last start. So I'm not willing to throw all the data that we have on Edward Cabrera out the window because of one big start. A talented dude. I don't think I'm going there today at 8,700 against the Cubs. Cabrera, like I said, high walk rate. He also really struggles to hold runners. And I kind of think this Cubs team might do some damage against Cabrera. I'm on the Cubs side of this matchup. And then, mixing in some of the Marlins, no interest in Hendricks. So I'm on the bats more in this one. What about you? Cabrera, Hendricks, Cubs, and Marlins.
So when we look at the pitch, again, I love going to that strikeout market. And Cabrera's total strikeout 6.5. Again, it's the same as Noli's, plus 120 at 6.5. So the upside is certainly there for the strikeout. So I think you have to, in MME, you've got to get a piece of them. I think Sabres projecting about 15%. I think if you're in that ballpark, you're okay. And I'm gonna say his name one more time to see if I get it right. Heel, is that correct? Did I get it right? Yeah. Pronunciations with me. Give me numbers, I'm fine, but speaking is not my strong suit. So, but yeah, you're getting. I think it's similar. It's a similar situation to what we were talking about there, where I think you've got a lot of upside in Heel, but you're paying more for it with Cabrera. So I think that's why you'd probably want to have a more Heel than you do Cabrera in these lineups for that price. What is it, 7,900 compared to what, 8,700? So I'm fine being 10% to 15% on Cabrera. And at the same time, I agree with you. I think you can mix in some of the Cub bats as well. Now, I'm not too high. I like the Miami bats a little bit more actually in this game against Hendricks. I mean, we've seen how bad Hendricks is. I just don't think you can play him even at the 6K. I just don't think you can make that play. And I think that I think you can get potentially, Miami, you hate taking them, but I think sprinkling in a few, I will have a few. Bell batting fourth, potential, get some potential home run. I'm going to have like very low amount of stacks, but I am going to mix them into my 150. And, really with the top of that lineup is what I'm looking at to potentially just keep this, the hurting that Hendricks has seen over his last few starts on. So it could be one of those, wacky Miami on a Sunday instead of an Oakland on a Sunday days. Sure. And so I think I want to be a little bit more Miami bats than I do Cubs. And I think Cabrera could be sneaky good. He could be a guy who gets us a ton of strikeouts today.
For sure. Cabrera, very, very boom bust pitcher. No question about it. I just like the Cubs side a little bit better myself. We'll answer some questions and we'll do stacks, pitchers, one-off, all that fun stuff. Andrew Jennings, hey guys, 5 minutes behind. Pittsburgh or Cincy? I like Cincy rather, a little bit better, but we both like those offenses to some degree. So I think you could even make a pretty good combination stack with those two teams in on the offenses. Good question here. We did talk about it a little bit, which I'm guessing inspired the question itself. Trevor Bryan asked, DC, can you talk a little bit more about some one-off rules? the big thing for me, and I kind of mentioned this before, you want the player to be able, this is obviously talking hitting, to be able to do the damage himself without his teammates. So at the extreme end, you have a player like Luis Arias, who is not going to steal bases, unlikely to hit home runs. He needs his teammates around him. He either needs to drive them in or be driven in by them to get to a big score. And in that case, if you're playing him as a one-off and he has a big game, probably his teammates around him did too, which will make it tougher to get to the top of a tournament. And then, on the other extreme end would be Elly De La Cruz, Ronald Acuna, Mike Trout, guys who can hit 2 home runs, hit a home run, steal 3 bases, and their team can fail, but they can succeed. So those are the players that we want as one-off in general. Like we mentioned, usually they are expensive, not always, right? Like I think you could play Trevor Larnach as a one-off. He's got big power. He's cheap in the middle of that Twins lineup. Could hit 2 home runs off of Mize while the rest of the lineup doesn't do a lot. So you want the power and the speed, obviously, and then you also want them in general, if you can, on lower-owned teams. I think because any player has correlation to their teammates, and if you're playing a one-off, you don't want them surrounded by super high-owned guys because then the stack likely goes off itself. Anything to add on either of those question stats?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it on those.
All right, let's get to the fun stuff. We'll do favorite stack overall, favorite contrarian stack, as we always do. Stats, you ready, or you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go ahead. What do we got? Favorite stack we're doing?
Yeah, favorite stack and then favorite contrarian stack.
Okay.
My favorite overall stack on the slate is going to be the Astros against Mitchell Parker. I just think not a good pitcher, good lineup. I know they've busted some in the past, but I pretty much like that whole lineup, especially 1 through 6. And then I do like Caratini as a cheap catcher down at the bottom. So I'll go Astros as my favorite overall stack. And then favorite contrarian stack, I'll just stick with the same game and go with the Nationals, who have a lot of power and speed at that top of the lineup. I'm not a believer in Hunter Brown, who I do think will get at least a decent amount of ownership on this slate. And yeah, I kind of like what I've seen from this Nationals offense so far. So same game for me, Astros and Nationals. What about you? Stats, favorite overall stack, favorite contrarian stack?
Yeah, like I said, the Houston was probably going to be my most owned stack, but right there with them, I'll just say Cincinnati. So I do like that Cincinnati stack today against the Angels, and I think in that ballpark, I think we could see. I mentioned that we could see both of those teams go off and then take like a game stack, a little football action here where we'll stack the entire game. So I'll go with my secondary stack, the Angels. I'm just going to take that entire game, look for that game to go off, and get us some big run totals there with a lot of home runs. So that's going to be my 2 stacks, my best and my sneaky stack, let's say.
All right, we'll go most important pitcher, relatively or somewhat defined as kind of pitcher you think you might be most over on compared to the field. For me, if Casey Mize comes in anywhere close to his projected Sabre ownership of 2%, which he won't, I bet he gets 7 or 8%, something like that. But still, I'm going to have, I think, at least 50% Casey Mize on 2 of my 4 DraftKings teams. I'm also planning on playing him on FanDuel, where he is Varland is 6,600. So I'll have Varland over on FanDuel. But yeah, Casey Mize is going to be very important for me on DraftKings. What about you? Your most important pitcher today, Stats?
I think it's going to want to be in Varland for me. So
yeah.
I think he might be my highest owned pitcher, and so I'm gonna have to go with that. It's very rare that a guy down at 6,400 will be my highest owned, but I think that's the way I'm going. I hate, I know someone said it, chalk Varland, but I'm throwing my chips in on him. So we'll see how it goes. I think he's got tremendous upside for the price.
Louis Varland, I'm also in on him. Let's go a home run call. I will go with Mr. Brandon Marsh, who's absolutely hammering the baseball early on this year. He did this last year as well before kind of fading throughout the season. Gets Nick Nastrini, who is going to be a fastball-heavy type of pitcher. Marsh, I think, will go overlooked, batting 6th, but love what I've seen from him and decent hitting weather out in Philly as well. So I'll go Marsh as my home run call. Let's get a home run call for the people stats.
All right, let's see. I should probably, since I took the Cincinnati game, I should probably go with someone in that game, right? So we'll go. Let's go with the leadoff batter. Give me Will Benson to hit one today out of the leadoff spot. That's what I'm going to go with. Lefty bat. So yeah, I'm going to go with Benson.
Hard to argue with that. We'll go overall play of the day, and I'll go with the guy batting next to Will Benson. I mentioned him several times. Got to go with my man, Ellie De La Cruz. Very expensive, 5,800. But if you like the cheap pitching today, like I do, you can certainly fit him in. Over to you. Stats for your favorite hitter on the day.
Favorite hitter on the day is going to be Altuve. So that'll be where I have most of my ownership on. So I'll go with Altuve today, leading off in a game that I think they will score a bunch of runs.
He was very, very high on my list as well. All right, that'll do it for this 10-game slate. We do appreciate you guys all watching. Hit the like button on your way out if you haven't yet done so. And we will be back same time, or not same time, but same place tomorrow, at least at the normal time, 4:45 Eastern time. Talking baseball on Monday slate. Enjoy your Sunday, everybody. Hopefully we'll see some RPS logos and some of you guys at the top of the tournaments. That'll do it for us. For Stats, I'm Draft Cheat. We're out of here.